Selection Sunday is almost here, which means we're about to get the official bracket for the 2026 NCAA Tournament. And with only a few games left in the conference tournaments, I wanted to go over my official March Madness Bracketology, where I predict who is going to be in and who is going to be out of the NCAA Tournament field of 68. But before we jump into my predictions, I wanted to mention that all odds in this video are provided by Kalshi, which is the largest prediction market in the US. And with Kalshi, you can trade against your peers rather than a sportsbook all tournament long, and it's available in all 50 states. And if you've never signed up before, there's no better time than now for March Madness, so make sure to download Kalshi and use code TBN to get $10 when you trade your first $10. But now, let's get into the bracket. And starting us off at the top, we have our 1 seeds, which are Duke, Michigan, Arizona, and Florida. And Duke is the overall 1 seed for me because they have that head-to-head win over Michigan, which keeps them at the top spot. And the only way this would change is if they lose in the ACC tournament and Michigan or Arizona win their conference. Right now, the Blue Devils are first in the quality metrics, second in the resume metrics, only to Michigan, and they have the most quad 1 wins in the country with 16 currently. And I was a little nervous about this team after only beating Florida State by 1 point, but they asserted their dominance in their most recent win over Clemson, and they are for sure the number 1 overall team in the country right now. Then, as my second number 1 seed, I got Michigan, who's first in every single resume metric, even better than Duke. And then they're second in the quality metrics, only to Duke. They have the most quad 1A wins, which is the top tier of quad 1 wins with 9 on the season. And they're the most likely team to jump Duke to the top spot if the Blue Devils were to slip up. Then we have Arizona, that's just behind Michigan and Duke in both the resume and quality metrics at number 3, and they're trending right now to win the best conference in the country in the Big 12. They have the most quad 1 and quad 2 wins combined, with 23 of their 31 wins on the season being in the top 2 quadrants. And even if they had lost to Iowa State in the semifinals, which it looked like they could have, they would have stayed put here as a number 1 seed because all of the top 3 have solidified their spot as a 1 seed come March Madness. Then, for my fourth 1 seed, I have the Florida Gators, which is a new number 1 seed for me, and they have finally jumped over UConn, even with the head-to-head loss that they have to the Huskies. Right now, the Gators are just the hottest team in the country, and on one of the nation's longest win streaks. They're 5th in resume metrics, only to UConn, but the combination of being 4th in quality metrics across the board and having the 4th most quad 1 wins behind the other top 3 1 seeds with 12 is why I have them ahead of the Huskies, and it feels like Florida is just a step above them right now. Then for the 2 seeds, we have UConn, Houston, Iowa State, and Michigan State, and UConn is my top 2 seed and the most likely candidate to replace Florida as the final 1 seed if the Gators were to slip up. And right now on Kalshi, traders have UConn at a 15% chance to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So if the Huskies win the Big East and Florida slips up in the SEC tournament, you can win $100 on just a $15 trade, and that's one I have my eye on. But they are also 4th in the resume metrics, including wins above bubble, and tied for the 4th most wins in quad 1 and quad 2 combined at 18 wins. Then you have Houston, that's 28-5 on the season, and they're solidly the second number 2 seed to me. The Cougars are 5th in wins above bubble and top 6 in all metrics used by the committee right now. And all 5 of their losses on the season are quad 1 losses, so they don't have anything outside of the top quadrant. And then they also just dominated a Kansas team in the Big 12 tournament that is highly regarded in the metrics, and it just further solidified their spot and their seeding to me. Then I have Iowa State as the number 3 2 seed, and they're top 10 in both quality and resume metrics, and they have stacked up 18 quad 1 and quad 2 wins with 0 losses outside of the first quadrant. And I know that Iowa State beat Houston head to head, and I do value that, but that game was a home game for Iowa State at Hilton Coliseum, and I believe Houston's resume is just that much better than Iowa State's, similar to why I have Florida above UConn right now. And then my final 2 seed is Michigan State, who's 25-7, and they're coming off of a tough loss to UCLA in the Big Ten quarterfinals, and they slid back to my last 2 seed because of that. But still, they're top 10 in resume metrics, top 11 in quality metrics, and have some of the best wins in the country, including head-to-head wins over Illinois and Purdue, which help keep the Spartans in front of them for me. But then jumping to my 3 seeds, this is where we see teams like Illinois, Purdue, Nebraska, and Gonzaga. And the top 3 seed right now is Illinois, and they move back to the 3 line after their loss in the Big Ten quarterfinals to Wisconsin. But the quality metrics, absolutely love this Illini team as they are ranked at number 6 there, but they are now down to just 15th in the resume metrics, which pushes them to the 3 seed as well for me. And all 8 of their losses are quad 1 games, so they haven't taken any bad losses. And the Illini have racked up 5 quad 1A wins, which include Purdue and Nebraska, which keeps them above both of these teams for me on the 3 line. And speaking of Purdue, they are my next 3 seed, and they're 25-8 on the season, and they just picked up a big win over Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament. And similar to Illinois, quality metrics really like Purdue as they are right around the 8th ranked team there, and they're also 8 in KPI, but their strength of record and wins above bubble rankings hold them back a bit. And there's a possibility that Purdue could get a 2 seed for me if they win the Big Ten tournament. But other than that, I think they stay as a 3 seed come Selection Sunday. Then Nebraska comes up as 26-6 on the year, and they just lost to Purdue, so I have to put them behind the Boilermakers. And although their record is better, they are tied for 12th in resume metrics with Purdue, but Nebraska is just 16th when it comes to the quality metrics, which is behind the Boilermakers. But however, they do have no losses outside of quad 1 and 9 wins in the first quadrant, which keep them firmly as a 3 seed for me. And then my last 3 seed is Gonzaga, and with Alabama losing to Ole Miss in the SEC tournament and the Zags winning the WCC, I moved Gonzaga back up to the last 3 seed in my rankings. They do have a quad 3 loss on the season to Portland, which really hurts the resume, but outside of that, this team is 7-2 in quad 1 and 11-2 in the first 2 quadrants combined, as well as being a top 15 team in resume metrics and top 10 in quality metrics. And they actually have the head-to-head win over Alabama in the non-conference portion of the season, which makes a bit more sense to me as to why I have them above Alabama. But then jumping to our 4 seeds, that's where I have the Crimson Tide as the number 1 4 seed, and then Virginia, Vanderbilt, and Kansas. And for Alabama, as I mentioned, they just took a tough loss to Ole Miss in the SEC quarterfinals, which drops them back to the 4 line for me, but they still have one of the toughest strength of schedules in the entire country and finished at 23-9 on the season heading into the tournament with no losses outside of the first 2 quadrants. They're top 10 in resume metrics thanks to the strength of the schedule and top 15 in quality metrics as well. So this team is firmly a 4 seed, and I believe that's what we'll see them as on Selection Sunday. Then I have Virginia, who has had one of the most impressive records in the Power 5 at 29-4 on the year and 9-3 in quad 1 games so far this season, and Ryan Odom's first season with the Cavaliers. And this puts them as 7th in wins above bubble and 8th in strength of record. And their predictive metrics, though, are what is keeping this team at a 4 seed for me, as they are just 18th on average. But I will say, if they win the ACC tournament, I could see them potentially making a jump to that last 3 seed and bumping Gonzaga back down. So I wouldn't say a 3 seed is out of the question for Virginia just yet. Then I have Vanderbilt, who moved up to a 4 seed to me. They were a 5 seed previously in my last Bracketology update, but with that win over Tennessee in the SEC tournament, I felt like that gave them enough to get to this 4 line, and they're top 14 in both resume and predictive metrics, and they may also have a shot to get the last 3 seed if they somehow beat Florida and win the SEC tournament, but right now that just feels a bit unlikely with how good Florida's playing. But then we have Kansas as our last 4 seed. They're 23-10 on the season, and they stayed on the 4 line even after their double-digit loss to Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament, because the Jayhawks are 9th in KPI and 13th in wins above bubble, and they also have 9 quad 1 wins and are top 10 in quad 1 and quad 2 wins combined with 16 and no losses outside of those top 2 quadrants. Then jumping to my 5 seeds, that's where I go Arkansas, Texas Tech, St. John's, and Wisconsin. Arkansas is my top 5 seed after advancing in the SEC tournament with their win over Oklahoma, and they could potentially get to the 4 line by winning the SEC tournament. They're 14-8 in the first 2 quadrants with no losses outside of quad 1, and are top 18 in both resume and predictive metrics. They also own the head-to-head over Texas Tech, which keeps them above the Red Raiders for me. And for Texas Tech, they're 22-10 on the season, and they have a pretty similar resume to Arkansas, which is why I have them behind, because I value that head-to-head that Arkansas has over them. But they also have some of the best wins in the country, including a neutral site win over the number 1 overall seed in the Duke Blue Devils, as well as wins over Houston and at Arizona and at Iowa State. And the JT Toppin injury didn't affect my rankings with how good Texas Tech has showed they could play without him, but it could affect them come Selection Sunday, so we'll just have to wait and see on that. Then I have St. John's. They're 27-6 on this year. Their predictive and resume metrics are right there with Arkansas and Texas Tech, but other than their win at home over UConn, they lack the high-quality wins that both of these teams have and are just 3-5 in Quad 1, but 15-5 in Quads 1 and 2 combined, so they have a pretty solid resume overall. And then we have Wisconsin, who I moved up to a 5 seed with their huge win over Illinois in the Big Ten tournament. And their resume and predictive metrics are right around 22nd in the country, but they might have the best collection of high-end wins out of any team right now, because that includes Michigan, Illinois twice, and against Michigan State. And this is probably their ceiling in terms of seeding, which would be the 5 seed, regardless if they win the Big Ten tournament or not. But maybe somehow they get to the 4 line. I just think the 5 seed is right where they can get. And then for my 6 seeds, that's where we have North Carolina, Tennessee, BYU, and Louisville. North Carolina dropped to the top 6 seed after losing to Clemson in their first game of the ACC tournament. And the Tar Heels' resume metrics are top 20 in the country, but it's their predictive metrics that are almost at 30th, which is holding them back. And I do think that Caleb Wilson injury could definitely affect their seeding on Selection Sunday, because this team definitely looks like a completely different squad without him. But then we have Tennessee coming in as my second 6 seed. They took a tough loss to Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament, but they're 12-11 in quads 1 and 2 with no losses outside of the first 2 quadrants, and 22-11 overall in the year. And their predictive metrics are extremely high, which helped them a lot, and they average out around 14th. And they also have some solid high-end wins like Houston on a neutral floor, Alabama, and Louisville, with that one keeping them ahead of the Cardinals for me on this 6 seed line. Next, we have BYU, who's 23-11, and they kept themselves as a 6 seed by winning multiple games in the Big 12 tournament behind AJ Dubana's dominance there. And at one point, I did think they were going to drop to a 7 seed with how they ended this season, but they were able to hang on, and they're top 25 in both resume and predictive metrics and have 7 quad 1 wins on the season. And this could be, though, another team where injuries affect their seeding, with Richie Saunders, who is out for the rest of the year. And just like the Tar Heels with Caleb Wilson, this team looks completely different without Saunders on the floor. And then we have Louisville coming in as my last 6 seed with a 23-10 overall record, and all 10 of their losses are in quad 1 games, and they are 12-10 in the first 2 quadrants combined. But with Michael Brown Jr. returning, the NCAA tournament should be huge for this team, and is one of the reasons why their predictive metrics are so high at 15th, is because how good he's been this season, and is another reason why I've kept them here as a 6 seed. Then moving on to my 7 seeds, I have Miami, Kentucky, UCLA, and Clemson. Miami has had a strong season under first-year head coach Jay Lucas, and their resume metrics look good, with being 25th in wins above bubble and 23rd in strength of record out of the ACC. And the Hurricanes are 25-8 overall in the season and 12-8 in the first 2 quadrants. But then you have Kentucky, who's coming in at 21-13 on the year, and they had Florida on the ropes in the SEC tournament at the end, but they weren't quite able to get over the hump and beat the Gators. And for a team that has 13 losses, none of them are bad, as they are all inside the first 2 quadrants, where they are 12-13 overall. But the thing helping the Wildcats the most to me is those high-end wins that they have, like St. John's, Tennessee twice, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt, so all teams that are seeded just higher than them. And then we have UCLA, who I moved to the 7 seed, and they might be one of the biggest winners of the conference tournament, as the Bruins have moved out of that 8-9 game and into a 7 seed after their win over Michigan State. And after a slow start to the year, UCLA has just steadily gotten better and gotten their season back on track. And now they're 23-10 overall and 10-10 in the first two quadrants. And they also have high quality wins of their own, like Purdue, Nebraska, Illinois, and now Michigan State in the Big Ten tournament. And then my last 7 seed is Clemson, who's 24-10 on the year. And for me, for Clemson, they stayed here after their win over North Carolina in the ACC tournament. And there is a bit of movement that they could make going up if they won the ACC, but I'm not sure if I would have them getting to the 6th seed line. But the Tigers right now are around 30th in both resume and predictive metrics, and they're 13-10 in the first two quadrants, including 7 quad 1 wins on the season, which is pretty good for a team around this range. But moving on to my 8 seeds, that's where I have Utah State, Ohio State, St. Mary's, and Georgia. Utah State just barely behind Clemson for me right now. It could jump them if they were to win the Mountain West tournament. The Aggies metrics are around the 31st ranked on average, but they are 21st in KPI. However, they do have a quad 3 loss on the year, which hurts the overall resume and keeps them at an 8 seed for me right now. Then we have Ohio State, who's one of the biggest risers over Bracketology projections over the past couple of weeks. They were previously out of the NCAA tournament, and we were all complaining about how Bruce Thornton wasn't going to make an NCAA tournament in his career, but then they picked up a win over Purdue at the end of the regular season and have rattled off 4 straight wins then before losing in a close one to Michigan in the Big Ten tournament in a game where I thought the Buckeyes had a chance to win. And if they had won, they probably would have been up to a 7 seed for me. But now, still an 8 seed. Their predictive metrics are great, though, at 26th on average. But the biggest knock to me on the Buckeyes is that they're below 500 in quad 1 and quad 2 games combined at just 9-12, which does hurt. Then we have St. Mary's coming in at 27-5 on the year, and I dropped St. Mary's to an 8 seed after losing in the WCC semifinal to Santa Clara. And although it wasn't a bad loss, I just wish they would have won that game and gotten to the finals to take on Gonzaga again. But they do have some of the best metrics on this seed line, as they are 27th in resume metrics average and 25th in the predictives. But the lack of high-quality wins outside of their 1 quad 1 win against Gonzaga is what is keeping me from putting this team any higher on my seed lines. And then my last 8 seed is Georgia, who played themselves up a seed for me with winning their last 3 regular season games before falling to Ole Miss in their SEC tournament opener. And their metrics are solid as well, as they are top 35 in both resume and the predictives. And the top end wins over Arkansas, Kentucky, and Alabama keep them above the 9 seeds for me. But then moving on to the 9 seeds, this is where we see teams like Villanova, St. Louis, TCU, and Iowa. And Villanova is my top 9 seed, and this team has some really good metrics. They're actually 27th on average in resume metrics and 35th on average in the predictives, but they only have 2 quad 1 wins, and they have a quad 3 loss, which definitely hurts that overall resume to me, and is why I have them so low as a 9 seed. Then St. Louis comes in at 28-4 on the year, and I previously had the Billikens as an 8 seed, but dropped them to a 9 seed due to some of their recent losses. But they are advancing in the A10 tournament and could play their way back to an 8 seed with a win. But their resume is pretty similar to Villanova, just a few spots back in both the resume and predictive metrics. But their best ones are Santa Clara and VCU, which isn't bad, but definitely lacks compared to some of the other teams around this spot. And one of those teams is the next one in TCU, who might have the best collection of wins in the country, which includes Florida and Wisconsin on a neutral court, as well as Iowa State and Texas Tech in Big 12 play. And for me, the Horned Frogs have played themselves out of the bubble completely and are comfortably in the NCAA tournament. They are 35th in resume metrics and have 3 quad 1A wins, which is more than anyone else in this area of the bracket. But what is holding them back is the fact that they suffered a quad 4 loss in their first game of the season to New Orleans, and we thought they were all going to be out of the tournament because of that. But the way this Horned Frog team has battled back has been extremely impressive. But then the last 9 seed to me is the Iowa Hawkeyes, and they come in as my last 9 seed, thanks in large part to their predictive metrics, which has them around 27th in the country. For their resume metrics, they're not bad, but they're 38th in the WAB and 40th in strength of record, but they do have 2 quad 3 losses and only 3 quad 1 wins in total, which is a bit concerning, and I think the predictive metrics are really helping out a team like Iowa. And then jumping to the 10 seeds where we get closer and closer to that bubble picture, I have UCF, NC State, Santa Clara, and Miami, Ohio as my last 10 seed. And starting off with the Golden Knights, UCF could be higher based on their resume metric average of 33rd, but their predictors are down at 56th in the country, which is one of the worst out of everyone on or near the bubble, and is the reason why I have them as a 10 seed. But the Golden Knights are 11-11 in the first two quadrants, with 5 of those wins being in quad 1, and they should be safely in the field come Selection Sunday. Then we have NC State, who's 20-13 on the season, and Will Wade and his squad have definitely been playing themselves closer and closer to that bubble picture at the end of the year, losing 7 of their last 9 games. The Wolfpack are 40th in resume metrics and 11-12 in quads 1 and quad 2 combined. However, they do have an awful quad 4 loss to Georgia Tech on the resume, which pushes them down even further for me. Then I have Santa Clara here at 26-8. The Broncos have played their way well into the field to me with their win over St. Mary's in the WCC semifinals. And with that win, Santa Clara got to 2 quad 1 wins on the season and to 8-7 in the first 2 quadrants. They did take a loss to Loyola Chicago, which is the only bad thing on their resume because it's outside the first 2 quadrants, but I don't think that will hold them out of the field, and I think the Broncos have done enough to get in. And then my last 10 seed is the Miami, Ohio Redhawks, and Miami, Ohio might be one of the most controversial at-large bids of all time, but for me, they are safely in. And right now, Kalshi's market on Miami, Ohio to make the tournament is right around 75%. And with the Redhawks going undefeated in the regular season and likely missing the first 4 as well, you could make a $75 trade and turn it into $100. And I'm definitely looking at that because I can't see the committee leaving out a team that went undefeated the entire regular season, regardless of their strength of schedule. And obviously, with their loss in the quarterfinals of the MAC tournament, they have a bad quad 3 loss on the resume, but they are still 37th in wins above bubble and 28th in strength of record, and those metrics alone should get the Redhawks into the tournament. But I'm really hoping that the committee doesn't send this team to Dayton just with what they've done so far. I believe they truly belong in the first round of the NCAA tournament. All right, jumping into my 11 seeds, I have Missouri, Texas A&M, VCU, SMU, Oklahoma, and South Florida. So starting off with Missouri, they're 41st in wins above bubble and 39th in strength of record, and they're 9-12 in the first 2 quadrants and have no losses outside of quad 1 and quad 2, which is huge for the Tigers. They also have really high-end wins over the likes of Florida, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee, so they have proven they can beat NCAA tournament teams, which is something the committee looks at. And they also have the head-to-head over Texas A&M, which puts them above the Aggies for me, because the next team is Texas A&M, and the Aggies and Tigers have similar resume metrics, but the predictives definitely do prefer Texas A&M, and the Aggies also have 9 wins in quad 1 and quad 2 combined, with no losses outside the top 2 quadrants either. But the resumes are close enough that I do feel comfortable keeping Missouri above A&M due to that head-to-head results. Then I have VCU, who comes in, and their resume is actually really solid at 25-7 on the year for the Rams, and they're 6-7 in quad 1 and quad 2 combined. They're 32nd in KPI and 42nd in strength of record and wins above bubble. The predictors are what is holding this team back right now, as they are ranked just 49th there. So there is a chance if this team does not win the A10 that they don't make the tournament. But another team I've been looking out on Kalshi is SMU, who is my 4th 11 seed, and right now 47% of Kalshi traders are predicting SMU to miss the round of 64, and with how close they are to being out of the tournament and potential bid thieves still around, I like this trade, and it pays out $75 on just a $35 trade. And SMU right now is ranked 37th in the net, which is helping them tremendously, and they have managed to not take any bad losses as they are all in the top 2 quadrants. But the Mustangs, they have wins over tournament teams like Texas A&M, North Carolina, and Louisville, but I am a little nervous about the bid thieves and think they could knock SMU out. And there are some other teams on the bubble that the committee might think just has a better overall resume than the Mustangs. But then my last team in the field is Oklahoma at 19-15, and they have been one of the hottest teams in the country over the past couple of weeks. And Oklahoma is another team I'm eyeing on Kalshi, as Kalshi traders are giving them just a 33% chance to make the round of 64. But with their resume and how they currently have been playing, I think they have a better shot than most think to get into the tournament. And you can make over $150 on just a $50 trade on Kalshi. But before their loss to Arkansas in the SEC tournament, which would have guaranteed their spot in the NCAA tournament if they pulled out the win, the Sooners were on a 6-game winning streak and had won 8 of their last 10 games. But their resume is extremely similar to some of the other teams that I have just on the outside looking in. But the fact that they are 10-15 in quad 1 and quad 2 with no bad losses has left me to keep them in the bracket, barring any bid stealers. And then my last 12 seed is South Florida, but USF is at the projected auto bid out of the American Athletic Conference, so they wouldn't be in the first 4, and they're currently on a win streak of their own at 9 straight, but could have a case as an at-large bid if they were to lose in their conference finals, because this team actually has really good metrics around them as well. So look out for USF and the American to add maybe another bid stealer into the mix. But I quickly wanted to go over the bubble picture that I'm currently projecting. For my first 4 buys, I have NC State, Santa Clara, Miami, Ohio, Missouri. Then my last 4 in is Texas A&M, VCU, SMU, and Oklahoma. So all 4 of these teams would be playing in the first 4. My first 4 out is Texas, San Diego State, New Mexico, and Seton Hall. Texas, for me, that bad loss to Ole Miss in the first round of the SEC tournament could be what keeps the Longhorns out of the NCAA tournament completely. Also, Oklahoma beat Texas in their most recent matchup head-to-head, but they split the season series overall. But looking at Texas and Oklahoma's resumes, I actually like the Sooners more. Then you have San Diego State, who got the win over New Mexico to advance to the Mountain West Tournament Finals. But for me, they will likely need to win the Mountain West in order to get in. And then New Mexico, they're likely now out with that loss to San Diego State in the conference finals. And the same with Seton Hall. They took a loss to St. John's in the Big East semifinals, which likely keeps them out of the NCAA tournament as well. Then my next 4 out is Auburn, Indiana, Stanford, and Cincinnati. And all 4 of these teams did themselves no favors by losing a bit early in their conference tournaments. So I think they're likely on the outside looking in come Selection Sunday. And then I'll quickly go over my 12 through 16 seeds so you can see where I have everyone listed at right now. My 12 seeds are Akron, McNeese State, Yale, Northern Iowa, and these are definitely the teams I'm eyeing for a potential upset. Then my 13 seeds are High Point, Utah Valley, Hofstra, and North Dakota State. My 14 seeds are UC Irvine, Troy, Wright State, and Idaho. My 15 seeds are Tennessee State, Siena, Furman, and Queens. And my 16 seeds are Long Island, UMBC, Howard, Louisiana Tech, Lehigh, and Southern. But that wraps it up for this one. Let me know your thoughts on my March Madness bracketology and who I have in the field and out of the field right now in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.